and welcome to this special edition of Omali Yeshitela Speaks, brought to you by Burning Spear Media, the voice of the African Revolution. I'm Soliana, and today our theme is Criminalizing Black Thought and Resistance, the Fight for Anti-Colonial Free Speech. Today, we will be hearing from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the founder and leader of the African People's Socialist Party, which is the worldwide revolutionary party of the African working class, fighting for the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people everywhere. We are honored to be joined today by special guest Momodou Taal, host of the Malcolm Effect podcast. A dual citizen of the Gambia and the United Kingdom, Momodou Taal was a graduate student in Africana Studies at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. As a Cornell student, he organized on the front lines, taking a stand in opposition to the US-backed Israeli settler colonial states' genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank. Momodou Taal had been suspended by the university at least twice for his participation in protests in support of Palestine. On March 21, Momodou's visa was revoked after he took bold action for anti-colonial free speech by filing a lawsuit against the United States government's persecution of students who had spoken out for Palestine. Along with a Cornell professor and a fellow student, Momodou Taal's lawsuit against the Trump administration challenged its executive orders that claim to, quote-unquote, combat anti-Semitism on college campuses by arresting, detaining, and expelling students deemed as national security threats for their anti-colonial speech. The lawsuit stated that the executive orders, quote, unconstitutionally silenced plaintiffs and chilled protected expression, prohibiting them from speaking, hearing, or engaging with viewpoints critical of the U.S. government or the government of Israel under threat of criminal prosecution or deportation, unquote. Shortly after filing the lawsuit, the Department of Justice ordered Momodou Taal to surrender to immigration authorities. ICE agents came to his home and revoked his student visa. The U.S. government has revoked nearly 1,700 student visas. Security cameras have captured scenes of the U.S. government masked thugs assaulting, handcuffing, and kidnapping students in broad daylight. On March 27, a federal judge denied a motion to prevent Momodou's detention by ICE, as well as large parts of his lawsuit. And on March 31, Comrade Momodou left the United States. In a statement published by Momodou, he stated, quote, today I took the decision to leave the United States, free and with my head held high. Given what we have seen across the United States, I have lost faith that a favorable ruling from the courts would guarantee my personal safety and ability to express my beliefs. I have lost faith I could walk the streets without being abducted. Weighing up these options, I took the decision to leave on my own terms. The repression of Palestinian solidarity is now being used to wage a wholesale attack on any form of expression that challenges oppressive and exploitative relations in the U.S. The African People's Socialist Party stands in complete unity with Momodou Taal, with all of the African, Palestinian, and Arab students who are facing repression at the hands of the colonial state, and with the Palestinian people who are resisting the illegitimate, white nationalist, US-backed Zionist settler state of Israel. We recognize that the Trump administration's actions are a part of a broader history of the colonial counterinsurgency to criminalize African people's free thought, free speech, and resistance to colonial oppression that began 600 years ago when the first Europeans set foot in Africa. The current U.S. regime continues the escalation of the assault on anti-colonial free speech that was initiated by the previous administration under Biden, with the attempt to frame up and imprison Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Huru Three on bogus charges of being Russian agents for speaking out and organizing for African liberation and reparations. As Chairman Omali has stated, when the First Amendment was written, African people were enslaved. Who else but African people would be at the vanguard of the struggle for free speech? That is why we say hands off Momodou Taal, hands off Gaza, hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, victory to Palestine, victory to the African Revolution, and colonialism must go. We are once again very honored to have Momodou Taal join us today, but before we get into it, I do want to introduce my co-MC for this program, Comrade Director Tafari Mugeri of the African People's Socialist Party in occupied Azania, or South Africa, who will speak to us about African resistance taking place in the Sahel region of Africa as we speak. So Comrade Uhuru, Comrade Tafari.
Uhuru, Comrade Sulian, thank you very much for that, overview and introduction. This is going to be an amazing program. So I just want to quickly encourage everyone to go around, go on and share this live everywhere. Make sure that people can have access to this program, like, and make your comments and talk about this, because today we are going to talk about anti-colonial free speech. Anti-colonial free speech, and obviously with Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Comrade Momodou Taal. And I just want to say that sorry, on this day, Africans and those in solidarity around the world. I'm sorry, my throat
It's
is very dry. I'll come very quickly just. Okay, sorry about that, comrades. I do apologize. And I was just about to say that on this day, Africans and those in solidarity around the world are standing in solidarity of African resistance in West Africa with the African resistance in West Africa. So as you know, we know with Comrade Captain Ibrahim Traore and his alliance with the alliance of the Sahel state over there. There is this attack from imperialism, and worldwide on this day, on the 30th of April, people all over the world went out in support, with this resistance that's taking place in the Sahel region. So we just want to salute that and say that African people must continue to struggle to fight for the total liberation of Africa, so for the self-determination of Africa and African people worldwide. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Comrade Tafari, thank you so much. I also do want to mention the chairman later in this program will be putting forth, the position of the APSP of the situation in the Sahel and the inferred U.S. threat to Traore and the people of Burkina Faso. So definitely stay tuned for that portion of the program. But right now it is my honor to introduce Comrade Momodou Taal, and we will be conversing with him. So Comrade Momodou, Uhuru, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
Of
And thank you so
course.
much for such a elaborate and humbling introduction as well. Thank you.
We're only speaking the truth, comrade. So thank you so much again for coming on. And so while we have you, we do have a few questions prepared, and we just, want to start off with, despite facing suspensions, threats, and now the revoking of your visa, you've continued to speak out courageously in support of the Palestinian people, and you've, been a vocal supporter of the Palestinian struggle long before the uprisings on October 7th as well. So can you talk about your background and how you became
Yeah.
active in the struggle, against colonialism?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's difficult to kind of, I guess, state or where do I write the history, right? For me, as early as I can remember, from about 2008, when I was about 15, I remember posting on, I'm showing my age here. I remember posting on Facebook, Free Gaza and Free Palestine. And that was largely due in connection to my religious faith, being a Muslim. But the more I study, I realize it's not a religious conflict, right? It's not a conflict that is exclusively within the realm or purview between Muslims and Jewish people, right? It is a clear-cut issue of settler colonialism. While there is a religious tint to it, of course, thinking of October the 7th, Al-Aqsa flood, the road to liberate Aqsa, these are the invocations of religious symbols. But fundamentally, what we see, it is an issue of colonization. And as someone who's, someone from West Africa, growing up, I'm hearing of West Africa, I'm hearing of imperialism, I'm hearing of assassination of our leaders. And the more I study, for example, you mentioned my podcast, The Malcolm Effect, two things. Malcolm's famous essay on Zionist logic, right? And Malcolm, on the day he dies, one of the last letters he sends, he talks about Zionism, right, as well. So I constantly, when I was reading my revolutionary fathers and figures and ancestors, right, Kwame Ture, Sekou Toure, Kwame Nkrumah, one James Baldwin, one thing I could notice and keep seeing was they always linked the Palestinian struggle to the black struggle and vice versa. They always saw black and African liberation as intrinsically linked to Palestinian liberation. And me as a young person thinking, wait, hang on a minute, Africa's over here. Even though I say Gaza is North Africa, I do say Gaza is North Africa, but we can talk about that why in a bit later. But people say, oh, they're Arabs, for example, whatever people may say to kind of divide us. Question being, what is it about the Palestinian struggle that had so many of our like revolutionary heroes center it in our struggle as well? And kind of studying that history made me even more committed and maybe me more understanding of the fact that there is no Pan-Africanist future because if there's a country in the world that is able to get away with such impunity in front of all of our cameras, kill up to 20,000 children and more, destroy and ignore every single multilateral institution. What does that say about those when Africans continue to rise up and claim our sovereignty? Right? We see the way imperialism kills our leaders. If they can do that to one country, they can do it to all of us. And that's why I think anyone in the world, anyone of conscience, should care what's happening in Palestine.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you saying that. And, just noting the sort of this ubiquitous colonial context that informs the sort of struggles that we see, in this erroneously gets characterized as a sort of religious thing, as if that could be divorced from this, very colonial process of removing people from their homeland and then calling it, a homeland that we need to return to because the Bible told us to, right? So I definitely appreciate you mentioning that very material aspect of it and how that impacted how you yourself as an African seeing that history and connecting it to what we're seeing in Palestine. So yeah, thank you so much. And Comrade Tafari with our following question. Huru. You're muted, Comrade, if you are speaking.
I do apologize once again, comrades. I think I'm just about to catch a flu, like they say when America sneezes, the whole world catches a flu. So
Mhm.
it's the crisis of imperialism right now, but the chairman always says that it's not our crisis, and it's an opportunity for us to strike out for our total liberation. So, comrade, I just want to ask also, could you tell us about the lawsuit
Yeah.
that you filed against the Trump administration and how the administration responded?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think given the language on the campaign trail with Trump himself saying that if you attended a pro-Palestinian protest, we will find you and we will deport you. Given the kind of high-profile nature of my suspension, I felt that I was going to be a target and I wanted to, offer some protection. I couldn't fathom just sitting and waiting to be attacked by a fascistic government for the right of speaking against a genocide. Right. So me and my legal team said, okay, what are forms of legal redress we could approach? One of them was suing the government, myself and two other professors. And the legal claim we made was the executive orders that are combating anti-Semitism are really done to chill and stop pro-Palestinian speech. And secondly, it stops citizens from having the right of hearing speech as well. So we kind of filed this lawsuit and I guess I did think it would, go up further throughout the courts, but boy, were we wrong. The government was not happy with being challenged. We filed the lawsuit. Within next day of filing the lawsuit, within the next day, we had a tip off that the FBI and DHS are looking for me. Right. I was then told to sleep with my lawyer's numbers in my pockets, medicines in my pockets. I was not at home I left when I wasn't at home before, but I had to leave another address again, staying with a friend. No one knew where I was. The day after, ICE turned up to my house. 2 days after, my lawyer receives an email saying you must surrender Momodou Taal to ICE custody. 2 days afterwards, after this is all before the court hearing, by the way. This is all before I had a day in court. 2 days after that, Friday, a week later, oh no, 6 days after filing the lawsuit, I get an email that my visa's revoked. All before the lawsuit. Couple days later, we have our first hearing, and judge basically said, and basically the government was arguing, oh, this is not retaliation. We plan to revoke Mamadou's visa 1 day before he filed his lawsuit, right? And the judge believed this. And the judge began the case by saying, I'm inclined to believe the government. and she challenged us on jurisdiction. She said she doesn't have jurisdiction. And in the end, she basically said, and this is a Democrat Biden judge, actually, funnily enough, recent to the bench. She said that Momodou can fight his lawsuit from jail, basically. And then we kind of appealed. We have filed a TRO, temporary restraining order. And I just want to note today, Mohsin Mahdawi was released from he was from Vermont federal judge ordered his release after being in ICE custody for a week or two. And it's so interesting that where the judge who in our case didn't see the merits of our case, the same argument was being made for Mohsin and judge accepted it. So it really just rests on the type of judge you get. Honestly, right? Because we made the same arguments. The judge, even in Mahmoud's case, cited our case as well as proof. So we just got a terrible judge. And I think it's a shame. But as I said, we filed the lawsuit, and I wasn't just seeking national injunction for protection for myself. I was looking for everyone in the country. I was seeking for every single international student to be protected. And again, I think given the kind of retaliation, the way the lawlessness in which the Trump administration has been engaging in, it became to a point where even with a favorable ruling by the judge, I could not guarantee that I was going to be safe and I was going to be able to walk the street. So I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to self-deport. And people keep asking about my education, and I appreciate it. First and foremost, but the world does not stop and start at Cornell. But secondly, I am able to finish my education and I'm finishing my degree remotely. And I have 2 years left to finish my degree.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and I just appreciate you just breaking that down. And there's anything we've learned, just throughout U.S. history, and as a party ourselves, with being attacked in 2022 for the same right to anti-colonial free speech, is that doesn't matter if it's a Democratic judge or Republican judge, anti-colonial free speech, speech that challenges the status quo is always going to be attacked, right? Because we recognize that whether it's a Democratic or Republican administration, it's inherently antagonistic to their colonial project. And so I appreciate you sort of mentioning that. And shout out to you for finishing your degree overseas. We do understand that that's important too. And you did talk about this a little bit, and so it's a good segue. Could you talk to us more about what happened on the day that ICE agents actually came to your home and what that looked like? Um,
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't there. I'm not. I think, if I'm being honest, I think I saw like a ragtag bunch of,
mm,
bandits. Like they're not sophisticated. They're not smart. They came to my house, three cars positioned strategically at different entrances and exits. I wasn't there. I hadn't been at my address for a very long time. And then they kind of were staking at my house. A few of my house members approached them. They kind of flashed a badge and then said we're the police, and then drove off, right? And then I knew it was ICE because of that's how they roll. But also they then said to my legal team, we're unable to locate Momodou. From that point, I went into effectively underground, right? I was in hiding, right? I was in a place no one knew where I was, or just a one person knew to bring me my food, but I hadn't gone outside for 2.5 weeks effectively, right? I hadn't even seen sunlight for so many days, for example. It was quite tough being in that environment. I think if it was in that moment I realized, yeah, this is. I mean, I always knew it was getting serious, but I think when it had in those conditions, I thought to myself, "Oh crap, this might be my life going forward for a very long time, and am I ready to deal with this?" You're right, and I think at the same time, it also dawned on me as well that people need to also stand up as well. Like we're the citizens, right? We're the citizens, even though we know again that might not be the ultimate protection, but it's better than what I can do. I'm on a student visa. I don't even have a green card, right? But I said ICE came to my house. I was told to surrender myself into custody. My visa was revoked. We had a hearing, and then about 2.5 weeks later, from filing the lawsuit, it wasn't like I planned to leave. It wasn't like this long, drawn out decision. It was very much okay. I no longer have faith and confidence that even a favorable ruling will protect me. And about Sunday at 11 o'clock, I called my friend up and said, "Okay, let's leave." And then by Monday morning, I was gone.
Yeah. Yeah, Uhuru, this is actually testament to how violent the social system of colonialism is. This is pure violence. And, this is just a testimony. And there's countless other stories that African people could tell out there in terms of how this system continues to be aggressive towards us as colonized people,
Yeah.
even if as we resist and even as we don't resist. So I just appreciate that you've chosen to resist against this colonial mode of production. So my next question would be that African people have always stood shoulder to shoulder with the Palestinian people, and I think you alluded to this. Can you talk about why it is important to understand that the African and Palestinian struggles are one struggle against colonialism?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways of tackling this. And I think fundamentally, historically, if you look at Israel has never been a friend to the African people. Right? People have said I had an unfortunate interview yesterday where this woman from Ghana said, "Oh, no, she's from Nigeria." She's talking about the Biafran War, saying Israel was a friend to Biafrans and etc. Again, I've always said if you look at Israel bombed Tunisia, Israel bombed Egypt, Israel voted against Algerian independence. Look at Namibia, Rhodesia. Like again, this is like historically, Israel supported apartheid South Africa right to the very end. Contemporarily, the only country to vote in support of the U.S. illegal blockade of Cuba is Israel, right? And now Ukraine. But again, it is all heads of the same imperialism in many ways. Um, Israel arms and trains U.S. officers to kill Israel, so give surveillance technology to kill black folk in the US. My point is that even if you don't see yourself in the Palestinian struggle, which I think any person of sound conscience should see themselves in that struggle, materially, Israel it's been enemy of the African people globally. You name a country, you name a place where African people are, and Israel's involvement is there. Israel's involved in Congo, for God's sake. Israel has involvement in what's happening in the Congo as well. Israel's involved in what's happening all over parts of Africa in a negative way. So my point is that materially, as African people, Israel is our enemy. And I've always said to be pro-black is to be anti-Zionist. That's a very clear position for me historically, and I think even importantly in 1975, when the official UN declaration that Zionism is racism was adopted, and it was only removed or walked back because Israel refused to come to Oslo in the 90s. Who pushed that? It was Sekou Touré and those in the OAU at the time, Organization of African Unity, who pushed that Zionism is a form of racism because they had said explicitly that we recognize what Zionism is. We recognize it for those of us who are just coming out of formal colonialism or material colonialism in official colonialism and gaining our independence, formal independence. We recognize what this is, and this is settler colonialism because we have intimate knowledge. We know this viscerally. So my point is that those who are sons and daughters of Africa, who know an intimate knowledge of the legacies of colonialism, when you see what happened to Israel, just open up a history book and it's like look into Israel today. It's like looking into a history book of what happened in the continent for decades and centuries. So for me, it's a very clear case, and I think if you are against colonialism of your people, you should be against colonialism for anyone else as well. And this is a clear-cut example of that.
Uhuru, thank you so much for that answer, Comrade Momodou. I just, first of all, really appreciate you mentioning all of that history of just, Israel never being friendly to African people. That's really important. But also just noting how the system of colonialism has informed the material conditions of, all colonized people, and hence, resisting it will necessarily be this multi-pronged attack by all colonized people. There's no sense in sort of seeing that as divorced from one nationality or other if you are a colonized subject in this world. And so I just appreciate you noting that. And so last but not least, we have one more final question for you. And this is regarding your podcast, which you mentioned earlier, The Malcolm Effect, of which you are host. Could you tell us about what kind of issues you discuss on your podcast and how people can tune in and listen, and how that has overall also developed as your case has developed as well?
Yeah, thank you so much. So the Malcolm Effect can be found on Spotify and all major streaming platforms. The book has just come out as well, The Malcolm Effect Revisited. Um, it's a podcast about political education, excuse me, race, Pan-Africanism, gender, Islam, um, Basically, I do political education in an accessible way for young people, covering all kind of contemporary issues.
All right. Well, thank you. That's a yeah, a good breakdown of that. I just again really appreciate you spending time with us talking about your case and your show. I'm definitely gonna tap into the Malcolm Effect, and anyone here tap into the Malcolm Effect, as he said, is on all streaming platforms. And I just again want to salute you and definitely stay in touch with us and everything. So uhuru,
Brr.
right,
Thank you.
uhuru, of course. All right, comrades. Well, so next up in our program, I am honored to introduce Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you very much, Comrade Soliana. And I really want to express my appreciation to Comrade Momodou Taal. It's really interesting because there's a comrade who was a founding member of the African People's Socialist Party who married someone whose last name was Taal, someone in the Gambia whose last name was Taal. And in fact, her daughters, at least one of them lives there now, off and on. I just want to say that I think that this is an extremely important discussion and that there are several issues that contained within this discussion. For one thing, hoping that people will hang on. We won't be here that long, but I do want to be able to put forward the party's, the African People's Socialist Party, position on this situation in Burkina Faso and the threat that's being, without much subtlety, directed at Burkina Faso and Comrade Captain Saori. And this African Workers of the World United organized a global day of action today in solidarity with Burkina Faso. But I want to connect what we are listening to now to the struggle in Burkina Faso. I think something that's often quoted by Mao Zedong, who was chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, and others have said it before then, that war is politics with bloodshed, and politics is war without bloodshed. And that's what we're seeing right now, an avalanche of war with and without bloodshed. You see what's happening, and it's all connected in so many different ways in occupied Palestine that sometimes people refer to as Israel. We see what's happening with Ukraine, bloodshed. We see the threat of bloodshed directed at Cuba and continuously, and directed at Venezuela, and directed at the Sahel region, where people are struggling just to be free. And then you see the war without bloodshed, most often on the college campuses that would attack this Comrade Momodou, and would attack all kinds of students all over this country, and not just in this country. We've seen them attacked in England and other places. And so I'm hoping there's an element of security for Momodou in the United Kingdom where he's gone to, because we know of at least one occasion where I think it was 3 women, one of whom was Palestinians, who simply had written on the backs of their shirt "from the river to the sea," and they were attacked and imprisoned as a consequence of that. So I'm hoping that Comrade Momodou finds some element of security there. I think it's really important for us to raise this issue of free speech. It's a splendid opportunity, a splendid moment in history, because for the longest period of time, up until this extraordinary moment, the US and England and all of these colonial powers have been able to get by and telling the world how much they stand for democracy and freedom of speech. They claim to have even introduced the idea of free speech to the civilized world. Of course, what they meant by civilized is something different from what most of the peoples who've experienced their civilization would mean by that. But now what we see is that it's extraordinarily difficult, even for the United States and much of Europe, to pretend that theirs is a just rule. When they come and say that there are no laws that we will respect when it comes to supporting the status quo, which is a status quo of murder and brutality, vicious genocide against the Palestinian people, when it comes to the issue of African people in the United States or any place else in the world, that they will not respect that. And it's really clear that it's increasingly difficult for them to even pretend that theirs is a just rule. And one reason it's hard for them to pretend that there is a just rule, and this, by the way, is a prerequisite, I should say, for stability of any regime. It must believe, and the people who are subject to its rule must believe that this rule is just. And now, increasingly, even the rulers exhibit a fact that they don't think this is a just rule. More than that, they don't care. They move as though having enough guns is enough to keep everything stable. The other thing that's necessary is that their presumption that their rule is permanent. That is to say, the state is permanent. The government they have is permanent. This is a prerequisite, again, for a stable kind of regime. And of course, they can't believe that theirs is a permanent rule if they've concluded that it's unjust. They've concluded themselves it's an unjust rule. They talk about it being unjust. You have people who are in charge of affairs at the helm of the United States government not pretending that it's just. And in that instance, it becomes absolutely unnecessary. It's absolutely clear that they do this because it's difficult for them to believe in the permanence of their rule. And belief in the permanence of the rule is important, both for the oppressor and the oppressed. Those who are governed by an oppressor state must believe that it's permanent. They must be convinced that it's permanent. They must be convinced there's no way you can change this. This is the only life you can live. If there's going to be any stability, if there's going to be any quiet on the plantation, if there's going to still any resistance before it even realizes itself in the world, then the oppressed must believe that this is a permanent rule. And of course, those who are oppressors must believe that it's permanent too. Because if they don't believe it's permanent, there's nowhere in hell they could do the kinds of things that Momodou has just talked about to him. They could do the kinds of things they've done to us in the Uhudu 3. They could come to our homes at pre-dawn with armored vehicles and using military forces and flashbang grenades and cordon off entire communities, etc. It is absolutely necessary for them to believe that this is permanent, and it's absolutely necessary for those of us who experience this to believe it's permanent. If they don't believe it's permanent, then the depth of the crisis for them becomes expressed even more sharply. And it is a crisis for the social system that we're experiencing. And even expelling Momodou is a statement of crisis, because again, we're talking about a system that brags about free speech, that brags about the Bill of Rights and things like this. They say this is part of the ideological foundation of this social system that they have created. But we know different. Momodou knows different, and masses of people in Palestine know different, and the masses of Africans and Venezuelans and people all around the world know differently. And so it's not just, it's not something that is based on democratic principles as they would have us believe, certainly not democracy as we would define democracy, because as we know, democracy itself is simply a form of the state. It doesn't say anything about the content of the government, content of the social system itself. It's a form of the state. Democracy for whom is the question that one has to ask. When they wrote the Constitution of the United States as an example that guaranteed free speech, that guaranteed a certain Bill of Rights, the rights to freedom of assembly, the rights to freedom of association, the right to free speech, right to freedom of religion, all these things. It was clear that this was done when this Constitution was ratified, when these Bill of Rights were ratified. African people in 1791, African people were enslaved and had no rights at all. There were no rights that were presumed to exist for African people. In fact, the Supreme Court of the United States said so as late as 1857 with the so-called Dred Scott decision, when the Supreme Court, not Donald Trump, not the last Republican regime, but the Supreme Court of the United States declared that Black man has no right that a white man has to respect. So this is part of the history that we're talking about. So the Africans had no freedom. And when you look at Momodou from the Gambia, I mean, the Gambia was a colonial entity itself. It was created through colonialism. That's to say the state and the concept of Gambia was created through colonialism. And so this is the reality that we are confronted with, and that I think is important for us to understand. So we've got a social system that has come into existence, and we're trying to work it out. Why do such horrible things happen to Africans and happen to Palestinians and happen to people in Venezuela in broad daylight? It's not even many attempts anymore to disguise what is being done to us. Threats of nuclear obliteration, if anyone should dare to deny what is going on, what is the oppression and exploitation of our people and the peoples of the world. This is the reality that we are confronted with. You look at Africa, 12 million square miles of value. I mean, there's not a single economy that could function effectively using the modern technology or the technology that has come into existence without resources from Africa. And yet, with all these resources leaving Africa, making Europe rich, making white power rich, and others are becoming wealthy and competent and capable because of it, Africa is starving, because Africa is being looted. Because what we've seen happen is the emergence of a parasitic social system. It's based in parasitism. It is, when asked to define what gave birth to capitalism, to this whole social system, Karl Marx defined it as a primitive accumulation of capital, that where you had the capitalist capitalist production that occurred before there was anything called capitalist accumulation. There was no capitalist accumulation. He said there was a primitive accumulation of capital. And this primitive accumulation of capital, he said, had the same significance in political economy as original sin in theology. In other words, this is where it all started. And he said this primitive accumulation of capital included turning Africa into a warren for the commercial of black skins. It included the attack that was made on what he characterized as the East Indies, where up to 50 million so-called Indian people were killed as a consequence of that. It included in turn the indigenous people in the Americas into the mines, bringing up gold and silver that went to Europe to give wealth to Europe. This is what he was characterizing as primitive accumulation. We could go further than this and talk about the opium wars that were made in 1841 and 42, where England attacked China and forced China into what they like to call a trade deal, where China refused to accept opium from England in return for tea. And because China refused that, a war was made against China. Actual war was made against China to force China to take opium, and it created a nation of junkies to facilitate the wealth of England, which went into what Marx was talking about, this primitive accumulation of capital that started the capitalist system. This is what must be understood. And then you had Africans who were throughout this hemisphere. The first plan, there was a world economy that was created off the attack on Africa. The whole world economy, what we are looking at now, has its origin in an assault on Africa, some 600 years ago by Portugal. It's the thing that brought Portugal out of poverty. It brought Portugal out of the kind of disease that it was living with in terms of the rest of Europe. It brought Portugal and all of Europe out of the feudal existence where people were living in starvation and sometimes, like in England, eating their cats and dogs and even their children. It was this war that was made on Africa that started the whole social system. This is the origin of colonialism as it emerged around the world. This is where Africans were kidnapped and at gunpoint forced to disperse throughout the world. The African people, this is what happened to all of us. And in the process of doing that, the whole, what we look at now in terms of the Americas came in and to be defined as a consequence of Africa. When you look at Cuba, when you look at Puerto Rico, when you look at all of the islands throughout the Caribbean and what have you, looking at the consequence of what became the colonial exploitation of African people who were forced into these situations at gunpoint. So this is the social system that we're looking at. And this was the dominant social system, and it was a defining social system. And Marx characterized this as the primitive accumulation of capital. Of course, such definition misstates what we understand to be the case. This was not some primitive accumulation of capital as he would have it understood. This was the essence. This was the origin of a colonial mode of production. When you talk about a primitive accumulation of capital, when you talk about African enslavement, turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins. When you talk about the enslavement of African people here, the attack on Africa that carved up Africa to satisfy European needs, the development, the emergence of Europe that did not even exist, even as a concept before the attack on Africa. There was no Europe. But all of this came into existence as a consequence of the attack on Africa, the dispersal of African people around the world, and the incredible resources, this wealth that fed this colonial empire that was emerging as a consequence of the attack on Africa. This was an incredible assault. And this is where all the wealth came from. It started out as a parasite. You know, V.I. Lenin, who was an extraordinary revolution in Russia, talked about imperialism. He talked about how imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. He talks about how imperialism is capitalism that has grown rotten right, that it has developed certain features, included parasitism. What we're saying is capitalism was born parasitic. It's a parasitic social system. Its parasitism was Africa. Parasitism, you can't even imagine the existence of capitalism as a social system anywhere in the world if you're not talking about what has happened with Africa. If you're not talking about what's happened to the Americas, the indigenous peoples there, many of whom living in concentration camps today. We talk about what's happening in Palestine, which is extraordinary. And Africans have always been in solidarity with the Palestinian revolution. But Palestine is all around us. It's certainly in the Americas. Palestine is the indigenous people whose land we occupy in this country today, who've been restricted to these concentration camps referred to as Indian reservations. In the United States, you have the largest prison population in the world. More prisoners in the United States than there are in China. Excuse me. I have read that if the people in American prisons who are colonial subjects were extracted, 2/3 of the prison population would be disappeared already. Excuse me, it's the colonized who are in prison. I want to make this statement from our party around the situation in Burkina Faso, because it's become an outstanding feature of the resistance, the anti-colonial resistance that's happening in Africa. In many ways, it has come to help define colonialism as it is occurring now in Palestine. It's that feature that's alarmed alarmed the colonizers throughout Europe and in the United States, and that has excited the imagination of Africans and others who want to see the end of this social system, want to see the end of oppression and exploitation. I think it's really important for us to understand that it's to the extent that we become clear that we're looking at a mode of production. It's not just a Palestinian question. It's not just a Venezuelan question. It's not just a question of African people in East St. Louis, the United States, or in South Africa, and various places like that. It's a mode of production that defines the political and economic relationships of everybody on earth. Right now, this mode of production is a definitive mode of production. And I'm not saying this, I'm not liquidating the existence of a Russia or a China in this process. I'm saying the definitive defining mode of production is the one that came into existence through colonialism. That wasn't what happened in Russia, and that wasn't what happened in China. But China and Russia are affected just like every other entity by this. And when I talk about a colonial mode of production, I'm not just talking about something that white people are free from. In terms of all the peoples on the planet are affected by this mode of production. It's the way that humans, and a mode of production is simply a way that humans engage to produce and reproduce life. And every aspect of life. That's what we're talking about. And so I wanted to say that the Palestinian struggle is our struggle, whether we're conscious of it or not. And some people say, well, I don't like Palestinians, or I don't like Arabs, and other ridiculous things like that. But it's not even a matter of whether you like people or not. There's an objective reality that's independent of our will, independent of what we would have, what we would think about it. There's an objective reality. And that objective reality is that all of us live under colonial domination. We're victimized by a parasitic social system. So I want to say that, and this is a statement, that official statement from the African People's Socialist Party that was put forth or written by Comrade Louise Kinshasa, who is the Secretary General of the African Socialist International. Comrade Louise, as a point of information, was born in Congo and has been in exile in England for a number of years now. So we say, and this is a global day of action around in defense and in solidarity with Burkina Faso. And this is something that our party has done to express this solidarity with Burkina Faso. So join the struggle, taking Africa back in our own hands. Stand with the anti-colonial alliance of Sahel states, taking Africa back in our own hands. Suggestion here is we are not spectators with what's happening in Africa, that we are part of what's happening in Africa, because it should be recognized that the forced dispersal of African people, this attack on Africa that's dispersed African people all around the world, also dispersed the African Revolution all around the world. We're in the Americas, we're of Africa, but we're part of the Revolution of the Americas as well. So this is a statement. We salute the just and historic struggles of the governments and African people in the Sahel states, who have in a short space of time expelled the US and French colonial armies from our sacred African soil. The anti-colonial governments of the Sahel states, led by Chiani, Goita, and Traore, are part of the general growing African resistance characterized by the rejection of foreign colonial powers led by the US and supported by unpatriotic African petty bourgeois neo-colonial governments. The governments and people of the Sahel have reintroduced anti-colonial resistance as the main politics in the region, contributing to the mobilization and excitement of African people in the region, in Africa, and throughout the world. The Alliance of Sahel States is capturing more and more the imagination of African people everywhere, who want nothing less than the total redemption of Africa for the benefit of all Black people at home and abroad. A clear example of this desire is the fact that in Guadeloupe, a French-controlled, French-colonized territory island in the Caribbean, in this place, at least half the people in Guadeloupe want to go home to Africa. We have to always see the big picture in every national or regional struggle. The attacks on Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru Three, on the Venezuelan government of Nicolas Maduro, and the attacks on Captain Traore are all part of the same war being waged by the colonizers to maintain colonialism as the global mode of production. The Alliance of Sahel States is not just fighting the US, France, French, and other parasitic corporations, but against the colonial mode of production. There is thousands of manifestations past and present, including the coup attempts against Captain Ibrahim Traore, threats of war against Niger, sanctions against the Sahel states, the bloody overthrow of governments of Lumumba, Gaddafi, the Congo, and Rwanda genocides, the Sharpeville massacres, the murders of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, the economic CFA and IMF and the World Bank's structural adjustments, the colonial slave trade, the lynching of African people in the United States, the punishment of Haiti, who dared to be free, and the anti-Black immigration laws that feed our children to the sharks in the Mediterranean. The question is, who must die? The global colonial mode of production or the African anti-colonial mode of production forces? The balance of power within the Sahel states has shifted in favor of anti-colonialist forces against the forces of the status quo and the African petty bourgeoisie. All these coup attempts against the government of Ibrahim Traore are desperate efforts to derail the forward motion of African people and reinstate the French or US control over the Sahel states. We in the African People's Socialist Party understand very well that for Africa and African people to be free, the global colonial mode of production must die. The colonizers must go. No African can afford to be a spectator. We are all called by history to act decisively wherever we are, to build the modern anti-colonial movement with the final objective of decolonizing the mode of production once and for all and replacing it with the African working class mode of production. To stand in solidarity with Captain Ibrahim Traore, General Chiani, and Goita is to be a part of the international effort to mobilize, activate, and organize all fronts of the African national liberation movement to achieve our final objective, the liberation and unification of Africa and African people. Our salvation is in one Africa, one nation. The salvation of the world is also in one Africa, one nation. This is what imperialist forces are trying to stop. From one Sahel state to one Africa, one nation. We are not clear that the union of 3 states in Sahel is the right direction. It points to the necessary unity of all 54 African states and all Black communities dispersed around the world to end white colonial power over our lives once and for all. The defense of the anti-colonial government of Sahel states, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali is upon us. It is what we do everywhere to build a connected single movement against the leadership of under the leadership of the African working class that will make it possible for the colonizers and their puppets, unpatriotic petty bourgeois forces to attack Captain Traore and the Sahel states. The defense of the anti-colonial government of Sahel states, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali is upon us. It is what we do everywhere to build a connected single movement under the leadership of the African working class that will make it impossible for the colonizers and their puppets, unpatriotic African petty bourgeois forces to attack Captain Traore and the Sahel states. The mission of the African working class is the mission of the African People's Socialist Party. The mission of the African People's Socialist Party is to complete the Black Revolution. That is to complete the revolution of Kwame Nkrumah, Malcolm X, Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, and others. But this time until it has been completed, this time till it's won. Join the mobilization for Captain Traore in your area. Connect the African People's Socialist Party in your area. Colonial motor production must go. African unpatriotic governments must go. Join the future. Join the African People's Socialist Party. Down with colonialism. Touch one, touch all.
Uhuru, Uhuru, thank you so much, Chairman, for your statement and overview and for reading, Comrade S.G. Loaizi's statement as well, and just, putting all these current attacks on anti-colonial free speech into, the larger context of the colonial mode of production, how, like you said, it's a statement of crisis, a symptom of what you have identified as the, the uneasy equilibrium. So just thank you so much for your overview, Chairman. And so moving on with the program, we, also want to note that you can support the work of the chairman and the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement in general by donating at uhurutours.com/donate. That is Uhuru, UHURU, tours.com/donate. Chairman Omali is a renowned speaker who can come to your school, community, or organizational event to speak about the rich history of our party and African internationalism, which is the philosophical and political worldview of the Uhuru movement. African internationalism allows African people and others to understand the world and how it got the way that it is, and it creates a vision for a future of liberation of Africa and African people everywhere, which is a world without oppressors or the oppressed. So if you want to hear more of that and, support this work, this important work that the Uhuru movement is doing, you can donate at uhurutours.com/donate. That link will be in the YouTube and Facebook chat. So make sure you donate and support that way. And you can also, drop a comment and let us know when you did donate or when you will donate so we can shout you out in the program. I don't believe we have received any questions from our audience yet. And so we might not have that section, but I already want to salute Comrade MQ who donated $10. So comrades, go ahead and make your donations at uhurutours.com/donate. And so since I'm hearing feedback from myself. Chairman, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I appreciate the participation of Comrade Momodou. And, he talked about fascistic occurrences here inside the United States. And I think that it's really important for us to understand that what is characterized as fascism in most instances is that moment when the colonial mode of production or the features of colonialism begin or threatens to begin to intrude into social spaces of the colonizers themselves. I mean, to even characterize it as fascism, I really think that, not from Comrade Momodou, but I'm talking about the whole history of the development of the anti-fascist movement, where Mussolini is the one who coined the term and is often used as the example of what fascism looks like. Of course, the most renowned fascism that we are aware of is that of Hitler. But when you look at what's happening to Palestinians today, in the hands of European Jewish population that is renowned for being victims of this fascism, it's quite clear that the colonial question is the dominant question, because all of those who are in power and benefit from colonialism use the most horrible and ways, methods to oppress the colonized. And even again, when Europe was singing its own praises about democracy and rule by law and what have you, it was colonial law. It was a law that was imposed on the backs of people who were colonized. And you can't even look at Europe, at Africa, that's been carved up the way it's been carved up by Europeans. Europe did that. And then this was before Mussolini was even born, before the concept of fascism was even born. You look at the fact that in Europe, some of the noted anti-fascists, and much of this is contrived, in Europe were the French. The beret-wearing French underground forces, etc., romanticized this, what was supposed to be the struggle against fascism. But this very same France that became renowned for fighting against German fascism was the France that colonized much of Algeria, colonized Algeria, much of Africa, bleeding that made war against the people in Vietnam, etc. This was the France, the colonial war, and that even created the Gambia, dominated Gambia, where Comrade Momodou is from. This is colonialism. And I really feel like the whole fascism gambit is opportunistic as hell. So we have people who would not unite with the colonized, would not unite with the Palestinians, would not, and talking about there are anti-fascists in Israel, who would not unite with the Africans in France. The Africans in Africa who were dominated by France would not unite with them, etc., would require us to unite again in the struggle against fascism. But when they struggle against fascism, they are struggling against a component of the system that they live in. It's a struggle between sectors of the same colonial ruling class that's going on. And so they would call on us to fight against fascism, to support the liberal colonialism as opposed to reactionary colonialism. But it's colonialism that's the dominant factor. I just want to say that we can't. This is part of the clarity that we have to achieve, and this is the time where clarity is extraordinarily important. And so, when we look at Momodou, we're talking about free speech, and everybody's talking about free speech. It's become a popular thing to talk about today. But who ever heard of a colonized slave having freedom, the right to freedom of anything? It's impossible. You can't have free speech under colonialism. You can't have free speech. I mean, what is a conversation or statement that's going to be made by a colonized person? It's going to be for freedom. It's going to be in colonialism. And this is an existential threat to the system itself, which is why Momodou was kicked out of this country, and hopefully he makes it safely and securely out of the United Kingdom as well. He may live in the United Kingdom. That may be his, where he lives. I don't know if his family is immediately from the Gambia or not. But just the point that I'm making is that you are subject as much in the United Kingdom to attacks on the right to free speech as you are in the United States. That's what colonialism is. So,
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, and we also did actually get one question from YouTube. And so while we have you, it's from Jesse Paris, aka Chain Kruma, who asks, "What can we Africans in America do to help Ibrahim Traore?"
We have to join the revolutionary project. We're not spectators who are cheering somebody on in Africa and the Sahel region. We are part of that revolutionary project. That's the point that I'm making. One. Two, Traore is really significant, and what we see happening in the Sahel states really, really, really significant. But soldiers in power is no substitute for the power of the people. And we need a revolutionary party that can deal with the existence of the social system itself, and the people have to be the primary component of that struggle. When you look at places where there's extreme, if there's such a thing as extreme oppression, sometimes there are only some institutions that have the ability to organize. And, like we saw that in Iran, under the US imposed Shah, where the US had overthrown the elected head of state there in the 1950s, and the Shah was there. People had no rights. It was a horrible, they had the Savak, which was the intelligence organization. It was horrible. Inside the United States, where there were Iranian students who were protesting against what was happening back home in Iran under the Shah. They literally had to wear paper sacks over their heads with the holes in it for the eyes, because the Savak was spying on them and would arrest and kill their family members at home. This is, the kind of thing that the U.S. has supported, and so it's just really important for us to understand that what we have to do is recognize that it's a global system of colonialism, and that we have to become organized to overturn that relationship that we have with this system. And we organized in the United States in a very serious way with the Iranian people. In fact, we were attacked by thousands of white people carrying American flags in 1979 in Gainesville, Florida, because of our support for the Iranian people and the Iranian Revolution. We've always been on the front lines of the struggle against colonialism, because we knew there was no separation essentially between people who colonize any place around the world, except some tactical differences may be there as a consequence of where we're staying and the strengths and weaknesses of the expression of colonial power where we are. But generally speaking, it's one system. And that's what we need to be able to understand. And this is not a call to ignore the African revolution and the particular features of that, and the fact that Africa, our position is that in the final analysis, it is going to be the liberation and unification of Africa and African people globally that is going to bring this whole colonial system down. It was the system that's built on the attack on Africa, the dispersal of African people around the world, and the theft of our resources and our happiness that gave it existence. And it's what's going to bring it down. So we know that, but we also know that it's a struggle that is a part of, it works with the colonized people everywhere around the world. So we don't make that distinction. So what can Africans do in the United States? You need to, you should join the party in the United States, join this movement, because there is nothing that we can do as individuals. I mean, there's something we can do as individuals, but the difference is going to be made by us coming into organization, an organization informed by revolutionary theory that says to what end are we engaged in this, And I just want to say again that Traore is really significant in what he does and what he represents. And he's been thrilling for a lot of African people in this era, but it's no substitute for the power of the people. It's no substitute for the people having their own party, revolutionary working class party. Because we're not going to be what we need is not going to come as a consequence of just a military. It's not a real struggle. The essence of this struggle is not a contest between armies. It's a contest between social systems. And we are fighting to create a social system, a different social system, free and independent of colonialism. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman. And yeah, Comrade Jesse Paris, who asked the question, says, thank you for answering my question, Chairman Omali. I met you in 2019 at the WAPO African Conference in St. Louis with Brother Zaki Baruti. So Uhuru. We have one more question from YouTube. Jay is asking, can you expand on the current condition of Haiti?
Yeah, it's hard to do when you look at Haiti. It's paying a horrible price. And one basis of the price is because it's isolated effectively. And Haiti, of course, is for those of us who are familiar with the Haitian Revolution. It was this Africans in this tiny island that carried the whole African world on its shoulders for a long period of time. It defeated the major European colonial armies of its time. It defeated France, it defeated England and Spain, and what have you. It initiated the first successful workers' revolution in history. And I want to just make a statement about that, talking about colonialism and how Europeans and even communists understand this whole question of colonialism. Because there had emerged in Europe and then in the United States this thing of the Spartacus League. Some of you are familiar with Spartacus, who became renowned because he led a slave revolt against Rome, some years ago, in ancient Rome. But it was unsuccessful. The successful slave rebellion was led by Africans in Haiti. Dessalines, in particular, led this revolutionary movement. But there's no Dessalines League in the white community anywhere. There's none. Among the most diehard communists and revolutionaries who opposed to slavery, there's none. And it's us, it's we who have to, carry this message. And because Dessalines was quite significant for a number of reasons. Because he was what Lenin talked about in terms of the need to actually destroy every component, every aspect of the colonial state. Dessalines tried to do that. He was merciless in terms of punishing the colonizers. But he was the one who said that any slave in the world, you get to Haiti and you'll be free. And that was true. People got to Haiti, they got land, they got resources and what have you. And even the comrade who is held up high today in Venezuela, who am I thinking of? No, Bolivar, Simon Bolivar, who's the hero of Venezuela and much of that area. It was the Haitians who funded him and who gave him the resources to make this. And in the first president of independent Mexico, African Indian president Guerrero, actually tried to supply Africans in Haiti to go on a mission to free the enslaved African people in Cuba. The Haitian Revolution had a profound impact on history. And it was Denmark Vesey, when he organized some 9,000 or more people to participate in an uprising, was influenced by the Haitian Revolution. And The objective is to fight and to take ships and to get to Haiti. This is part of what it's been. This was the African internationalist movement that existed at that time. So what we have to do is we have to, in Haiti today, the people have been starved. And let me tell you this whole notion that somehow there's something about Haiti that makes it starve, that makes it so poor. They've attributed the starvation and poverty of African people in Haiti to the same thing they've attributed that in terms of Africa. Here you have all this wealth in Africa that continues right now. It provides electricity for France out of Niger. It provides all kinds of uranium, coming out of Niger and all kinds of resources for Europe and for this country, the United States. But Africans are being looted and do not have access to our own resources. And in Haiti, it used to be called the Pearl of the Antilles. It was the labor of African people in Haiti that built the Eiffel Tower and created the sidewalk cafes and things like that. But it became characterized by the colonizers as this place of innate despotism and misrule and things like that. Same thing they characterized in Nkrumah. When Nkrumah was building the dam, the Aswan Dam, to bring electricity to Ghana. When Nkrumah worked to try to unite all of Africa, they characterized it as Nkrumah. He's got some kind of complex about running everything, about being in charge of everything. He's taking these resources and these grandiose schemes that he's got. So anyway, Haiti has been under attack. It's a feared entity by the colonizers, justly so, because it's always risen up, and despite like the brutality that's been inflicted on it, the revolution doesn't go away, and they do everything they can, and so a missing thing for Haiti. Well, right now, this is really interesting because you got this president of Kenya who works hand in glove with the United States and other imperial powers, has allowed Kenyan military forces or policemen to go into Haiti. The United States have been threatening to do it now for months, but they were faced with the optics of these white people going in to try to recapture Africa, Haitians again, or Haiti. And so they got France, Kenya, to send forces into Haiti. And this is part of what we're looking at, and Africans in Haiti having to contend with that. And we contend with it there. But the issue is that Haiti has stood alone, and there is not going to be a Haitian revolution as such. It's going to have to be a Haitian front of the African Revolution, just like there's going to have to be a Liberian front of the African Revolution or a Sahelian front of the African Revolution. We don't stand a chance by ourselves, but if we pull together all of these resources, that's ours, then we will win. And we win because doing that is a part of the whole process of decolonization. So anyway, what's the comrade's name who raised the question about Haiti?
Jay on YouTube.
Jay?
Jay, yeah, Jay.
Okay, well, who is Jay?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So we did have one more question, but before we get to that, I do want to note the comrades who did donate to uhuratours.com. Thank you, Comrade Chair Mwezi, who donated $10, as well as Comrade Sayera, who donated another 10, and then again, Comrade MQ, who redonated another $10. So we always know Comrade MQ be coming through, but again, you have time to donate. This program's not over, so you can donate, make your donations at uhuratours.com/donate. And the last question that we have actually is from Comrade Sayero on YouTube, who asks, And you did touch on this, Chairman, but it'll be good to go over it as well. But he asked, what now must we continuously do going forth as we see, as the Chairman has stated, an escalation of disappearing Africans on a massive global scale?
Well, I think it's important. I really appreciate the fact. I know one of the forces that initiated this this stance of unity with Burkina Faso and Captain Traoré. I know December 12th played a really important role in getting people to take this on. And I really appreciate that because, again, it's an expression of growing recognition of the fact that we are one people as Africans and that this is one struggle. We're still learning how to articulate that, but I appreciate that happening. And I think that it's really important that this day of solidarity occurred. And I know it was happening in various places within the United States and other places around the world. So I would call on especially members of our party and our movement to join into these mobilizations wherever we are. I would hope that we can make available to people the statement that came from the Secretary General of the African Socialist International, so that can be widely distributed, because this is not just a one-time action. It's not just one time. It's not an event that we are talking about. We're talking about a movement, a social movement that has to grow and has to be deepened. And it's really important for Africans to take this on. I have traveled in many places around the world. And one of the things that I've run into, especially when I've traveled throughout Europe and other places where Europeans were influential, I ran into this in Sierra Leone years ago in a mass meeting there, is that there is, most people understand the struggle of African people in the United States and other places based on the information and persons that they have access to. For the longest period of time, Africans were not traveling around the world, putting out our case and winning support and solidarity, but the white left was there. I remember being in a meeting in Sweden many years ago, and a meeting that was hosted by an international force, and there was on the agenda for this meeting, this is with communist forces, and on the agenda for this meeting was a discussion of colonized people in the United States. And they were talking about the Mexican people in the United States, and there was this white panel of white people from the United States sitting there, and I was so proud when this comrade, sister from Union de Barrio, the Mexican National Liberation Movement that we've had a more than 35-year relationship with. I was so proud when she threw her chair, put her chair up on the podium, and then literally forced the white people to move down, and she sat there and she took the Union de Barrio flag and threw it over the front of the table and spoke for Union de Barrio, because mostly we are not there. They're speaking for us. The settlers, the colonizers are speaking for us. So here you have settlers from the United States who are talking about the conditions of the Mexican people on whose land they have settled and defining the struggle for them. So that's what we're confronted with, and that's why it's so important what we do right now. This is an incredible moment in history where finally it's impossible for the colonizers to really evade this discussion around colonialism and the colonial mode of production. For years now, 50 years or so, the African People's Socialist Party, even in the face of the military defeat of the anti-colonial African revolution here and around the world, even when that struggle of African people was defined as a struggle against racism or the ideas in white people's heads, the African People's Socialist Party have been fighting to reintroduce the question of colonialism to the agenda, because what is the conclusion of a struggle against racism? How do you even know when you want? I mean, if you can win, it's not possible to win such a struggle. It's crazy. So we pursued that in this country. And in the world, we pursued this. Everywhere we went, the colonial question, people were annoyed at us because every time we looked up, we were talking about colonialism, and they wanted us to fight against racism, make white people like us kind of stuff, colonialism. We wrote on it. We did pamphlets on it. We held forums and all kinds of discussions in the United States and other places. We did it and for years in Europe. We traveled Europe. We traveled all over England. We were throughout, and then of course in Africa itself, we were raising these questions. And Sierra Leone, I never forget an instance when we were talking about reparations to African people. The African in the audience stood up and said how somehow that reparations, the demand for reparations, is going to divide the working class in the United States, meaning white people wouldn't like it. That's what it translates to. And so we pushed that issue. And in fact, that one of the most important things that's happened is the rediscovery, if you will, of the colonial question. It's just as if by magic, all of a sudden, everybody's talking about colonialism. I've seen and purchased 3 books written within the last 3 years on the question of colonialism, settler colonialism, all kinds of colonialism. It's been reintroduced into the world. It's a whole new era. It's a whole new period. And we have, and it's a period in the face of an obviously declining colonial powers of the world. It's obviously declining. This is one of the things that's driven them to a frenzy. This is one of the reasons they would come and kick Momodou out of the country. This is one of the reasons they would disregard anything that's called law for them. It's a frantic, frenzied kind of response to the people who are now struggling against colonialism. And we must take command of this, because increasingly, I was reading someplace where even it's become fashionable on some campuses now for white people, in the same way people have to give gender designations. Now white people have written, you know, who they are, and then put, you know, not they or he and she, etc., but settler. So this is, and you will see that you will read, this university is on the land of the Iroquois, this group and that group. They take the question, they neuter it, and make it a fashionable kind of thing, etc. But I want to say, yeah, I think it's really important for us to understand that. And it's important even to understand why there's such confusion about gender as well. And you know, it recognizes a real fight for science. And not to just be led around simply by emotions, because I'm emotional about this issue. I am, but my emotions are not what defines my recognition of the science. And I know that there is such a thing as a mode of production that's characterized by economic base, how human beings go about securing what we need to produce life. And then stemming from that, there are ideas, there are legal systems, stemming from that, there are cultural expressed through that, even religion, etc., come from that process. And to the extent that the economic base is challenged in a society, then the ideas get challenged too. How people perceive everything is up in the air, everything. Who the hell am I? I mean, this is the kind of thing that you talk about, the death of a political contradiction, that the economic base has been just shaken to its foundation. And so, you know, who am I? You know, these are questions that's up for air, you know, for grabs right now. This is the world we live in now. And this is why I come as Soliana. I want to express appreciation to you, and why we have to take it, you know, take these ideas and spread them, because the people are waiting for some understanding. We can tell them who they are. We can help them understand who they are. Uhuru.
Comrade Chair, thank you so much. And you know, while you were speaking, we did get more donations. So we want to shout out the comrades. Thank you, Penny Hess, for donating $25. And thank you, Ruby, for donating 10. Comrades, you know, show your support. You can donate at uhurutours.com/donate and get African internationalism out into the world. And I believe that was the last of our questions. And so while we have our listeners on, we do want to announce, and we have throughout the program, but if you didn't catch that, today is a global day of action in solidarity with Burkina Faso and the Sahel states, and we'll have a graphic shown up so people can see that there are, demonstrations and mobilizations taking place throughout the U.S. as we speak. So we're calling on people, to do something today, to join or hold your own action. It can be as small as, having one or two people with the RBG flag. You can make a video statement or do a small march in your community. And because it's important that we show the unified strength of the African nation against imperialism and colonialism. So go ahead and make sure that you take part in today's Global Day of Action in solidarity with Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traore and the Alliance of the Sahel States. Uhuru, so we are near the end of our program, and I want to invite Comrade Director Tafari to go ahead and close us out. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Comrade Soliana, and my co-host. You've been just brilliant, and I want to express appreciation and salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the leader of the African nation and the African revolution. It's always an experience of learning whenever Chairman Omali Yeshitela speaks. And I also want to appreciate Comrade Momodou and Taal for his participation on this program. And then we just want to say African people worldwide must continue struggling, resisting, and fighting until it's